Educating, informing, serving. Fact TV, keeping government honest.
How's that working?
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. First item will be to call the meeting to order. And I need a motion to approve the minutes of March 16th, 2021. There he is. Do you want to make a motion to accept the minutes or?
I'll second that.
Motion's been made and seconded to approve the minutes of March 16th, 2021. Any additions, corrections? Discussion? Seeing and hearing none?
We do have additions, Scott, that will need to be ratified at a later meeting.
On what? On the minutes, Shan?
So on the grant that Gary's here with.
Right. We can, yes. I'll talk about that.
We need to add it now to be ratified at a later meeting.
Well, we're at the minutes of 16. We'll do the
Oh,
additions.
sorry,
next.
guys. Sorry.
We do the additions next. All those in favor of approving the minutes of March 16th would say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? Motion carries. Okay, additions to the agenda for routine administrative matters and pressing matters that will require ratification at a future meeting. Scott, I think
So
you
we
got
do
that
have
one?
an informational item for you tonight. I know Gary's been working on an update to a grant. So Gary, could you just maybe come to the mic real quick and just give a brief update, and then we'll have a resolution at a future meeting just for local shares on this.
Sure. So the town and the village are applying for a USDA Community Facilities Grant for portable radios for the moving equipment and for a repeater to go in the existing tower. Total cost of $63,000, and USDA grant would be $50,000. There would be $5,000 match from the village that's in their proposed budget for the coming year, and there would be $10,750 from the town's economic development funds.
So we'll have a specific resolution for approvals. I know that Gary was working with the chiefs as late as this afternoon trying to get final numbers. So what's the timing on this, Gary, for the?
So the grant application is due April 16th. The grant itself doesn't need a formal commitment from the boards. There does have to be a public meeting here sometime before the grant is awarded, but after the application goes in, so probably the end of April or first week of May, we would have a public meeting announcing the grant and the matching pieces beforehand. So today is there's not a resolution. The grant doesn't require a resolution, but because it's committing matching funds, that you should know about it and authorize it.
So in order to meet that deadline and realizing that it wasn't on an agenda, what would you like us to do to move the application forward?
I guess a motion authorizing the matching funds towards the USDA Community Facilities Grant for fire equipment purchase.
If it's okay with you and the board, Peter, if we could add that as item 7, we could then deal with it at the end of the meeting.
Okay, and then we'll discuss at that point.
Yes. Thank you, Gary.
Thank you, Gary.
Okay, anyone else have anything to add? Scott, do you have anything else, or that it?
No, I'm sure if any of you drove in and around downtown today, you noticed already starting work on some of the bridge projects
Oh, yeah.
on the Arch Bridge, and it's going to be an interesting summer as we go forward. I think that we'll do the best we can with traffic management, but as you can see today, it doesn't take much to clog the at least.
Yeah, they were backed up
pattern.
when I was walking this morning, so.
So they're in the process of really just starting the very beginning, putting in the poles for temporary traffic signals and all that type of, activity. So more to come. Certainly, it's going to be a summer of disruption. We're hoping for people's patience and goodwill as we go forward with this, but it will be a little bit of a challenge. So.
All right. Public comment on items not on the agenda. See any public here? Anybody out there in Radio Land?
I don't see any.
Okay, thanks, Shannon. Manager's report.
So thank you. I'm going to keep it relatively brief because we have a speaker this evening that's going to give an update. Mr. Ankuta's here, so I don't want to take more of his time than is necessary. We also have our auditors as well are going to be presenting. So we'll keep our remarks short. We are working on some additional grants and also working on a couple of properties that we had discussed previously that have some maintenance and other concerns. So as we go forward, we'll talk about having to have a second meeting for appeal on the 1 Center Street property. Now we're into the spring, and we had talked about that, if you remember, back in January for people who are still on the board. For the new members, we have an action requested by the owners, so the board will have to meet and process that appeal. So we'll work on a date for that as we go forward. So those items are in active discussion and will be something that we'll try to bring you up to date on as we go forward. So.
Will that be at a regular meeting, or will that be a special meeting called?
Depends on agendas, and I'll work with Peter on that. It might need a special meeting. It really just depends on time and how much time we can invest on a particular evening. So
Okay.
we don't have to do it as a special meeting, but again, we'll have that conversation and try to work around everybody's schedule the best we can.
Scott, could you give us a little background on 1 Center, those of us who weren't there earlier?
So there was a process involving some complaints in the neighborhood. We ended up issuing health violations and nuisance violations and a couple of other tickets from the police department. The owners of the property asked for a appeal on the nuisance on the health order and the nuisance violation. So we split it up into 2 separate actions. We started the appeal on the health orders back in December and then extended it into January. The previous board issued a finding on those. They were not continued, but we still have an open issues of nuisance violations on the property. That'll be part of the second appeal, and we'll share with you some of the detail from that. As well as there's been some court activity on some of the tickets, and the understanding is that there were 3 specific tickets issued. They pled no contest to 1, and 2 others, I believe, were relieved by the court. So there's been a host of activity in and around the property, mostly dealing with property maintenance concerns and neighbor concerns about materials coming on the property and then disappearing and more materials coming. And so there's been a back and forth really since last summer, or even prior to that. So really the next action that this board will take will be to hear the appeal, and then there might be some other future activity depending upon, again, how things progress on the property. So we'll bring you up to speed.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll move on with the agenda, and this first item is the meeting of the Rockingham Board of Liquor Commissioners. One note that I should make on the first one, John Leslie Corporation, the first and class license, and then it says an outside consumption permit. The outside consumption permit was not in your packet, but the third class one was, but it was inadvertently left off of this agenda item. So when we make the motion, we need to include the third class license in in here. We do have the outside consumption permit here to be signed, so once we approve them, we'll pass them around. So I'll need a motion on those. We can do all three of them together, or someone wants to make that motion. No one?
I move that all three be approved.
Okay, you should read them. actually.
Okay, read. So the first one is for John and Leslie Incorporated, is that right?
Yep.
Okay. So,
Read them right off the agenda, Rick. It's the
Oh, okay,
quickest way to
good.
do it.
all right, yeah, it's getting a little complicated. Okay, I move that we approve liquor license applications for John and Leslie Corporation, first-class liquor license and outside consumption permit,
Add the third class license in there.
and a third-class license.
Okay, now you're all set.
Secondly, Wunderbar LLC, first-class and third-class liquor license, and Ryden Incorporated, first and third-class liquor license and outside consumption permit.
We hear a second. Motion's made and seconded to approve the three liquor licenses as read. Any discussion? They all seem to be in order. Seeing none, all those in favor would vote say aye.
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 Aye. All those opposed, nay. Motion carries. Moving on to regular agenda. We have with us today Town Council Steve Ancuda. He's gonna try and teach us how we're supposed to run this thing.
Okay. Yes, I've served as counsel for the town of Rockingham for a long time. Typically, most of the stuff locally would go, with Ray Masuko, and if he can handle it, they don't need me, and it's the things that are commingled with the village. But sometimes conflicts develop for lots of reasons, because of clients that attorneys have, or conflicts between the village and the town. So I'm from Springfield, been practicing for 40 years, and do a lot of municipal work for Springfield and Ludlow and Weathersfield and other towns. Hartford, I've done tax sales for them, and Putney back in did tax sales for them. So I'm just here to help out, and you seem to be running the meeting pretty well. My recollection is you're supposed to do roll calls if there are any video on any votes, but that's just my recollection. I didn't read the order, but I understood that that's on any votes, it's supposed to be a roll call. That's one of my comments there. Scott, I don't know if you had any guidance on that came from anywhere.
I usually just did appropriations as a roll call if it was a spending item or something that required an appropriation.
Okay.
Typically, the boards here have all done it by voice vote, so
Sure.
sort of let that one
And
progress.
yeah, what I've seen at other meetings is they start the meeting saying it's over video in accordance with the governor's order too. But that's beside that, you're doing fine. I don't see any reason to change anything. I'm available. It's what's important. I haven't met all of the new select board members. I know some of you. What's always a hard thing is when you have select board members and they think that they're in charge of the town, and you are, but only as a collective group. So it's a select board that makes decisions together. It's not any individual select board member. Sometimes you'll have a select board member that goes and talks to all the town employees and makes promises and does all. I'm not saying here, but I'm just saying that these are the things that we run into. Or they talk to property owners that something goes wrong and they make promises on behalf of the municipalities, and that's a nightmare. So just keeping in mind that you have to take action that you take as a select board, and typically, through the chair, get somebody, designated by the select board to speak for the select board on those kind of matters. I understand that there's some land use issues that are going on with dilapidated, unsafe, and nuisance buildings, and I'm going to have a little more involvement in that going forward, meeting with Chuck Wise and Scott, and just dealing with that. So that's really it. If anyone has any questions, right to know is really important. I think Ray Masuko might have sat down with you folks and talked to you about using email for town business. Hopefully he did. Any of you Did any of you hear that discussion, or?
The three new ones probably may or may not have. So I think another good area would be what the select board's responsibility is and what the manager is responsible for.
Okay,
So,
okay,
you know, I
okay,
mean, you know, we're basically policy
okay.
makers
So
and
sure,
enforcement, and then.
sure.
we
Yeah, I
got the-
wasn't given any real
Yeah,
outline as to
well,
what.
Okay, well, let's.
So let me hit the one the area I was going to first, and that is, don't use your personal email for town business without copying some central receptacle that there is government access to. You've heard about the public right to attend meetings and the public right to appear in front of the select board and to know what's going on. What you don't want to be is in a situation where you're doing town business by private email and somebody makes a claim against the town, and now you know what they're looking for? Every one of your email, full access to your private emails. And those can get a little embarrassing to everybody, for everyone to know. So if you absolutely personally don't use your personal email for town business. Now, I've had some people that set up a separate email just for their town business. Just if I have to send something around or something's being sent, just send it to a separate Gmail account. And that way, this is what you use exclusively for town business, and keep it that way. Just to make things easier, only if you get sued, but once you get sued, it's a real problem. And
Yeah, we have Steve is rockbf.org email, then that's all town business should be transacted there.
exactly, just
And
copy
then
that
Keeps it out of.
copy that email address on everything that you do for town email, whether it comes in or goes out. Somebody sends you something that doesn't have that email address, forward it right to that address. Then you can swear that everything that has ever been on any email you're involved with has gone to RockBF. Yes.
I have a question. I mean, that gets a little subtle when you know some of the staff. So, like a couple days ago, I sent an email to the staff from my personal, not my town email, just alerting them that there was an error on the website. Now, was that a no-no?
I would.
I'm just trying to get
I
clear.
would copy Rock. Just add RockBF as a separate, because what if the staff what if somebody is constantly complaining to staff about something that they perceive as errors somewhere? It can get sticky, and then that employee is making a claim. If you just copy RockBF,
Okay.
it's no issue whatsoever. No issue. It's buried in this pile of emails, and if somebody wants to see all the emails, go ahead, take a look. You can see it.
Okay, all right,
I
thank
would
you.
just recommend that. It's just
All right, yeah,
because that way you can swear I've never sent anything that had anything to do with the staff or town business that wasn't on that email address.
okay, good.
Yeah, it's just that's a simple way to do it. It's a little bit extra effort when you send the emails or receive them, but you'll be really happy in the end.
Okay.
Really happy. So as far as so we're talking about your duties, and that was public right to know. Again, you have a manager form of government, which means the manager takes care of the business of the town. And if you don't like what's going on with the town or what employees are doing, and the public works guys, though they've been busting their butt since daylight, and somebody stands up straight instead of bent over with a shovel in a hole, and you don't like that, don't complain to the employees, don't talk to them. If you have a problem, that's something that gets communicated to the select board through the manager. The manager's the contact is your conduit to the employees. You can't go directly to the employees. So if you don't like that employee and you think they're abusing their position, it's still, you say to the town manager, if you don't do your job, you're going to get fired. You can't say that to the employees. Okay? You can fire the town manager. You can't fire the employee. So that's and that's where the communication is. And again, because people get elected to the select board from all walks of life, you need to keep that real professional relationship there between the manager and the staff, the employees, and doing town business. So that really is the dividing line. Select board is to set policy, to deal with things, to to talk about how are we going to be able to afford this or that, and how do we, what do we do with budgeting for things? That's select board, that's policy issues. The town manager's job is to really take everything that you direct the town manager to do and think about it and figure it out, report back to you the pluses and minuses, but then implement whatever your policies are. So,
Steve, question?
yeah.
If I'm working with Gary on a grant application, do I have to copy CC Scott on all of that, or can I just work out these details with Gary?
Oh, that, if you're talking about the select board designating you as the person?
Yep.
Then, no, you've been designated to do that on behalf of the select board.
Mm-hmm.
Then you report to the select board on it, not to Scott.
Right, but can he use his private email or must he use a?
Don't use your private email. See, everything that you do related to town business,
Just go through RockBF.
it's just added as another party. It's so simple.
And we get an email. I got an email from someone we all did, from someone who's opposed to the automated vehicle testing in the town. Should we have forwarded a copy of that to our RockBF? I got it on my personal email.
The short answer is you're not doing business by receiving that email from a non-employee, non-staff, non-select board member.
Yep.
So you're not, just getting that email is not you doing town business. You can, they can yell at you from the street corner, but for that kind of information, you don't have to write it down and report.
All right.
That's just, you don't have to do anything with that. But if it was a town member, an administrative member that had a concern about it, that's when you need to RockBF it.
Thank you.
Steve, do you want to talk a little bit about the requirements of 3 or more trustees in a meeting or on a committee, and what the responsibilities and requirements for public?
Okay, so
meetings?
the public has a right to have an agenda for a meeting, to know what's going to be talked about. The law does, so you have to publish your agendas for your meetings. You can change those agendas as you did tonight with that separate item that Gary brought up. Usually you start it at the beginning of the meeting. It needs to be addressed at the beginning of the meeting is what the law says. You can change the agenda, add this, number 6, number 7, wherever it fits. And you just address it, you address it that way. The public has a right to know what's going to be talked about at the meeting and to participate and to address the board. That was the way Peter handled that was perfect. A few moments ago, is there any public input about things that are not on the agenda? Then I take it you'll say that for any other agenda items, any public input on these issues. So the public has a right to know and participate, and that is built into the law. The public has a right to address the board. They don't have a right to talk forever, but they have a right to tell their position once and then move on, so other people can speak.
But there's a rule that no more than 2 members can.
Oh, sure. So
Open meeting law.
So that's a meeting. If you have a majority, that's a meeting, and you have to warn it, give the public notice, and then have an agenda. This is what it's going to be about. So you can't 3 of you can't meet to go over something. You can't go to. We were talking about a property. You can't go there together to talk about that property. That's a meeting.
Mm-hmm.
You can go there separately.
What about let's say Gary sends me an email, an update on some grant he's working on, and I forward it to 3 other select board members. Is that breaking the rule?
That sounds like it's communicating something outside of a meeting about town business. So I would think that if Gary wants to report, he maybe should report it to everyone, but that you shouldn't be part of a discussion. And you forwarding it to other select board members is you're
Creating
instigating
a discussion,
aren't you? Yeah. And again, I can tell you that having been through a few court cases on this, that the judges are fairly lenient for breaches as long as you don't breach it much.
Right.
And you can ratify things at the next meeting or when it comes out, or even when somebody complains, you can, oops, we messed up, we'll ratify it.
I remember like 10 years ago, there was a lot of fuss with the library, and I
I was part of that.
I think you had to, go to court on that one, right?
Yeah, we had to go to Superior Court, and eventually the judge said, oh, that was one, by the way, everybody's emails, every trustee was deposed, and all their emails were requested. And that was really where it pointed out how you need to be careful with your private emails, because people were using them too much. But if you're communicating with other select board members out of hearing of the public, then there's business that's being undertaken. So you've got to be
But one-on-one you can.
one-on-one, you can discuss town business.
Mhm.
Right, but I couldn't send emails to both these guys.
That's 3 of you. That's a
That's
majority. You
three.
can
That's
take,
a majority.
in
Okay.
theory, you could take action to pass a vote.
Now,
Right.
another outbreak of that is, she talked to Elijah then takes the same subject to Rick. Now, there's 3 people involved in that conversation. That's not supposed to happen either.
It should not happen. It should not, you shouldn't violate it directly or indirectly.
Right.
Steve, if we're having a committee meeting, say the Opera House Committee gathers, it's a committee of the select board, and we're brainstorming ideas, so we can't write an agenda item that predicts what we're going to talk about exactly.
Right. So you say that's what it's about.
Okay,
You're going to be brainstorming ideas for the Opera House.
all
You
right.
give a notice,
Mhm.
public can participate.
Yep.
Or at least observe. Public has a right to speak, but any committee of the select board is a public body that has to follow the same rules as this greater select board.
So that means, agendas and minutes. They have to adhere to I think it's 10 days now on minutes because of the COVID thing. Usually
That's
it's
tough.
5.
Yeah.
Okay, and those minutes are sent to you?
No, they should be sent to the
Scott.
Rock BF, so they can send them out.
To-
And they post them on the website.
Send them to who then? The
So
clerk?
actually, it should go to Scott, and then
Scott.
they should see that they get posted on the website. Then anybody,
You can send them to me. I've
Thank
been
you.
doing the posting.
Okay, thank you,
Either
Shannon.
one of us, Shannon, doesn't, have somebody now working with us, so.
Yeah, it's really a shock to a lot of select boards and select board members and
Mm.
committee members that, gee, we have to do all these other things, but it's because the public has a right to see how the government is functioning. You can name a committee that none of you are on, but this is a committee to investigate something. That's a public body, and they have to follow the same rules. So again, it's trying to protect the public's right to know and be informed and have transparency.
Mhm.
Steve, could you talk a little bit about, and this is not to insinuate anybody on this board would ever do anything illegal, but just where the protections are for select board members acting in their official capacity, and where maybe the people get into trouble where they get past where they need to be officially, and sort of help people understand that. 'Cause there are
Sure.
protections for
So
them.
it really comes down to the first concept, which is the select board acts as a board. Any action by the town is undertaken by the select board by vote. And so if you have someone that goes out and does these things, talks to makes promises to guys at the town garage, or makes promises to citizens, you can have personal responsibility because you have said something that an employee or someone else has reasonably relied upon, thinking that you individually are the agent of the select board. So if you do something and you hold yourself out as an agent of the municipality isn't bound by it, but you personally can be bound by it. Because the municipality only acts through votes of the select board, or in the administration, it's by the town manager. But we're talking
Okay, I'd like a little additional subtlety in the guidance here. It's on our agenda tonight. At the last meeting, it was agreed that I would have an initial meeting with the select board of the town of Walpole
Okay.
to discuss working together perhaps on trying to get congressional earmarks for the Vilas Bridge, or working with us on a build grant, which can be applied, 2 communities can apply for that together. So I haven't been officially approved yet. It's on our agenda tonight, but I'm supposed to meet with them tomorrow night. My expectation is all I'm really going to do is say hello. Would you like to consider working together? And that's like it, right? I really can't go any further than that.
Well, you can, because you're the delegate of the select board, really, to to that meeting, or to meet with the Walpole Select Board, you should be thinking about collecting information. What information? I would think the Select Board, when you had a discussion about appointing you to be that delegate, gave you some guidance, like, this is what we're thinking of. We want to, tear down all the bridges, or we want to do. I know it's obviously to rebuild.
No, it's just
Silas
really
Bridge.
those two things, the build grant, I believe. I mean, I'm working with Gary on this. Gary's
Yeah.
the one that really knows the details. But we felt that someone from the select board should also be there,
So that's perfect. So you go along and you're with Gary, and you're there about, you're gonna, you hold yourself out as, I'm the agent of the Rockingham Select Board, and I'm gonna, pitch this idea to the Select Board and see what they will approve. Do you want to talk about it? Do you want to participate? Let's try to figure out a path forward, and then you report back and forth. So it's you are the express agent of the Select Board in that. That's exactly what you are. So you can't bind the Select Board, but you are the communication link to the Select Board.
I think the word we were using was liaison, just to,
Liaison's fine, yeah.
Because communications had broken down in years past. And it seemed like with the opportunity for this grant and earmarks possibly, it was time to, start communication again and see how they feel about things and what their view, have they made any progress in dealing with it, from their side of the, the river.
So perfect. You start the discussion, you try to find out what are your concerns, and you'll bring it back to your board.
Okay.
So it's and you ask questions, because you obviously would be probably more informed than any of the other members of the Select Board on those issues, because they've picked you to be the delegate or the liaison, and you'll report back, and you'll figure out from Gary what are the important elements that need to be addressed.
Okay, I just wanted to be real clear on that.
Unlike one of you showing up at some other Select Board and saying, hey, I'm a Select Board member from Rockingham. What do you guys want to talk about doing this, without being officially appointed? That's a no-no.
Okay.
And that's what we want to stay away from.
Okay, great. Thank you, Steve.
Okay, you're welcome.
What about conflict of interest?
I think did you pass a conflict of interest policy at your organizational meeting?
We do, yes, we have.
Okay. So you have to watch the conflict of interest policy. It's easy to read it in writing, and then to apply it is often totally different. But I think you can't have a direct financial impact for you or members of your household. Bellows Falls, like a lot of the other towns around here, people have great big families, and you probably, if you want to argue about conflicts of interest, you're probably conflicted out of everything. In theory, but the conflict of interest policy is it's much more limited. If you have a financial interest in something, and if it deals with your spouse's employment or your kids' employment, probably not your siblings. You have to cut it off somewhere. But I think you should raise the conflict. If you have a conflict with something, if you think you got to tell the board. And if you say you think you can, deal with it, the board in theory could overrule and say, no, we think you have a conflict there, and you should not. You should recuse yourself. You understand? If you recuse yourself, you shouldn't participate in the decision or even the discussion of the matter that's being before the board.
Does that pertain, or does that hold true for say a person that's involved in an organization that has come to the town for some monetary value? Is that a conflict of interest? For that person?
I've had to give opinions on that repeatedly for years and years. The short answer that I've come up with is that you should disclose that you're a trustee or a director of one of these other entities, and to the board, and that's enough. That I don't see it as a conflict, because it's not your personal financial interest, it's your municipal interest in helping out, public service. Yeah. And my God, if we limit everyone that's willing to volunteer in all these groups from doing anything, then who are you going to be left with doing anything? People that don't do anything. That's so it makes no sense to have that conflict of interest policy put a big blanket over actually public service. So you've got to have I view the conflict of interest policy as being really direct and really being a narrow financial interest in the matter before you. You know, if you live on a street and you're talking about repaving that street, I don't see that as a conflict. Your interest is no greater than anyone else that's in that area, in that kind of an issue.
Okay. Anyone else have any questions for Steve? Sue, anything?
I'm all set, thank you.
Okay.
So if you have an issue like the conflict of interest issue or something similar, you should go through the town manager, because my contact should be the town manager, because I don't work for free. So you want to limit attorney's fees, and if you go through the manager, and the manager might tell you the answer because he's done this forever. You know, I mean, he's a manager that's highly skilled. But if he has to go to the lawyer, then he can go to the lawyer and get an opinion. So you work through the manager on those kind of questions. You shouldn't call me directly. Okay, unless you got something against the manager. I've dealt with fire 4 or 5.
Not yet. Well, not yet.
Hopefully we don't have to talk to you about that, Steve.
No.
Come on now.
We're pretty happy with this guy.
I am smiling at whatever's on the film. So
Okay.
okay, all set.
I guess you're all set,
Done with
Steve.
me.
We'll let you escape.
Thank you,
Happy
Steve.
to help out.
Thank you,
I
Steve.
Thank
always
you.
enjoy coming to Rocky.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too.
All right, thanks, Steve.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Okay, item number 2 is the 2020 audit review. I see Josh Quinn has appeared on the screen, so I assume he's attending.
Yeah, so Josh and Shannon and multiple members of the finance and Josh's staff have been working on updates and cleanup in a variety of different items. So it's a little late in terms of where we want it to be, but I think, you know, it was worth the time and the energy to clean up some issues that I think needed to take that extra time. So I do appreciate all the extra effort from our finance folks, specifically, you know, Shannon's office, because it is a very labor-intensive process. And like most of you are aware, the clock doesn't stop. So the phones still ring, the agendas still continue, you know, business continues on. So this was really an all-hands effort to get this done, and I think we're at a good point now. So maybe, Josh, if you want, we could at least walk through what I did give a copy of most recent, I think this afternoon's most recent update. So they've got the 91-page document in front of them, so.
Okay, great. Hello, all. Nice to see you virtually. Apologize for not being there in person, but these are the times we live in, I would say. As Scott said, certainly this is a little bit later than we wish to be doing audit presentations as well. COVID did not leave the municipalities and auditing firms alone. It affected all of us. And so we apologize for that. And definitely next year, we will, I hope to see you much earlier. So I'll talk a little bit about the process and then I'll walk through the document. So in this year, again, COVID related, we didn't even really get started probably until January with your audit. And what we do when we're doing the audit is we do a number of things. We do a lot of planning, a lot of risk assessments based on our knowledge of the town, our experience from the prior year, any comments that we had then. And then we work closely with Shannon and her team and acquire a whole bunch of data, a whole bunch of information, go through and do a bunch of test work. So for example, if there's a procedure in the town that says we're going to use a purchase order to purchase anything over $250, then we go through and we verify that that is actually going on. So we do a bunch of test work. We then do a bunch of vouching and substantiation of all of your balance sheet items, all of your debt, your fixed assets, stuff of that sort. So we really try to touch everything that is considered material to your financial statements. So we can basically give you an opinion on whether or not we believe it is fairly stated. And happy to say that we have an unmodified opinion, which is as good as it gets in the world of auditing. And so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to walk through the financial statements, the 91-page document. I've filtered it down to probably about 7 or 8 pages. But feel free to stop me and holler at any time, or we can also do some questions right after this as well. So the first page I'm going to jump to is going to be, and I don't know, Shannon, if you want to make me a presenter, or I can just give you guys.
Your host, so you can share your screen.
All right, I can share.
Yep.
Perfect. Let me see if I can share the right screen. That's always a challenge. Okay. Can you guys see my screen now?
No.
No.
Nice
Oh,
picture of you, though.
Oh, thank you. All right, how about now?
We're good now.
All right, perfect. Let me see if I can. Okay. So first page I'm going to jump to is going to be Statement C, which is page 16. Oop. And this is your balance sheet for your governmental funds. And I jumped to here because the first question I'm always asked is, what's our unassigned fund balance at the end of the year? So as of 6/30/2020, your unassigned fund balance, i.e. basically the funds that you have in essence kind of at your disposal, was $1,381,000 and change. Just for some general figures, you had total assets of $3 million, liabilities of $954,000, some deferred inflows, and then your total fund balance of $1.65 million. Your fund balance is made up of various categories, non-spendable, which are typically your inventory and your prepaid items. So those are items that you've already purchased, and so those are set aside inside your fund balance. You're committed, so those are things that have been committed to other uses already. And then you're assigned, most often you're assigned is the amount of fund balance that you have set aside in a previous budget cycle. Or I'm sorry, set aside in a previous town meeting for the upcoming budget cycle. So for example, at the end of, as of June 30th, 2020, your FY21 budget had already been voted on. And in that budget, the taxpayers, and there was an article that said, we want to use $100,000 of surplus from the prior year to offset taxes in FY21. So that's what that assigned number is. On this sheet, there's also the other major funds. So we're required to show the general fund, always a major fund, and any other major fund. That is basically a calculation on the size of the fund, and it's a ratio to the total either revenues or total assets. So that's how we get these other funds that you see here, the development fund, library fund, trustees of public funds, and then other governmental, that is all of the remaining funds that you have. And those are both special revenue funds as well as capital project funds. And we'll get down to those as I move through the presentation here. Okay, so that's your balance sheet. I'm gonna jump now to statement E, which is page 18. So this is your statement of revenues and expenditures for FY20, both again for all of your major funds. We'll just look at the general fund for right now. You had total revenues of $6,860,000, total expenditures of $6,091,000. You had transfers in and out. So when you're transferring money in between funds, those are things that we pull down below the line, I'll call it, which is why you see them down under other financing sources. And those were a net expense, I'll call it, of $649,000. And so your net change in fund balances, so your activity over the year of FY20 resulted in a surplus of $119,000. So your fund balance as of July 1st, so when you started the year, was $1,531,000. You add that $119,000 to it, and so you end the year at $1,650,000. Okay, I'm going to jump all the way down to note 7, which is page 39. And I want to look at just your long-term debt. So the way the financial statements are arranged is we have all of the required statements in the first section. Then you have your notes to your financial statements, where this talks about and lists all of the different practices that you guys use, whether they be GAAP or GASB. And then it goes through and it talks about your long-term debt, your fixed assets, and basically a bunch of notes that are associated with those first statements, some of those first statements that we just looked at. I'm not going to go through all these because that's where the majority of the 91 pages are. Long-term debt is one that I always talk about. So you started the year with bonds payable of $3.7 million. You paid off, made principal payments of $525,000, which left you with a balance of $3,229,000. The current portion is the portion that is principal that is owed in FY21 of $526,000. Your notes from direct borrowings payable, that is basically notes payable, loans that you take out most often for like highway equipment, fire department equipment, stuff of that sort. So you started the year with $733,000. You added $550,000 of notes payable, paid off $338,000 to come to a balance of $945,000, $240,000 of which is due in 2021. If you wanted to get a more detailed understanding of what makes up all of those big numbers I just gave you, you can walk through the next couple of pages, and it actually breaks down each piece of debt and the outstanding balance as of the end of the year. So there's a couple pages of those. So you got the whole bonds payable, that $3 million number there, and then you have all your notes payable here to get all your direct notes payable, and then the total. Okay, moving along, fund balances. So we talked about fund balances. Here's actually a breakout that lists all of your different restricted fund balances, your committed fund balance, which I mentioned, and then your assigned fund balance. So I noted that your assigned fund balance, for example, was $100,000. That was for your subsequent year's expenditures. And so you can see that general fund has an assigned fund balance of $100,000 for that, basically to offset taxes in that FY21 year.
Josh, I got a question on that page. I assume you're on 43, correct?
I am, yes.
Can you kind of give us an overview of the restricted fund balance and what can be done with those funds?
So the restricted fund balances, so those are basically things that have been set aside, and they can either be set aside statutorily or by your voter. And it says, okay, this is, so your development fund, for example, all of those funds when they're set up are created and have documentation that says and dictates what you're allowed to do with those funds. So that's why it's restricted. So you've got a town hall fund, for example, that has $50,000 in it. And when that fund was created, and to create funds, they're typically a discussion amongst the select board, and depending on the type of fund, sometimes it even goes to the taxpayer as well. And then when that fund is set up, it's determined, okay, this is what the money that's inside that fund is allowed to be used for. Okay.
So if just follow me a scenario, if that money never gets spent in the year it's documented to get spent, what happens then? Does that carry over? Does it stay there, or can we use it somewhere else?
So for the most part, in all these, in your development fund, your trustees of public funds, and your special revenue funds, those just continue to carry over. And at some point, I've definitely had clients in the past that have special revenue funds that have, are obsolete basically. So they've been there and they've been sitting on the town's books for 12 years, and it's been 3 managers and 2 finance directors and 4 cycles worth of select board members, and often they don't even know what those funds are even set up for anymore. And so then there's a process to go through some due diligence, try to understand what that money, how you receive the money, what it was dedicated to, how you're allowed to spend it. And if you can't figure any of that out, then you do some due diligence and kind of go through a process of basically reclaiming that money back to the general fund if there was that situation.
Okay, thanks.
Yep. All right, so moving along, Schedule 1, which is on page 62. This is a very broad stroke looking at your budget to actual for the fiscal year FY20. And so it talks about the first section is your resources. So that's all of your revenues and then your expenses after that. And this is in total. Again, very, very broad stroke. If you move on to Schedule A, and these numbers then tie back and flow up into the Schedule E that we looked at earlier, or the Statement E, excuse me, that we looked at earlier. If you wanted to get a little more detailed look at expenses, you could go look at Schedule A, which is page 70. And that gives you a much more itemized budget to actually by department. And so you can see, you know, in general government, this is going to look much similar to the budgets that you guys probably see when you're going through your budget process. So you can see Select Board, Town Manager, it talks about the original appropriation and then the actual monies that were spent. And this is a number of pages, so it gets through all of your departments. So that's 3 pages long. Schedule D, these are your non-major special revenue funds. I'm going to actually jump, and this is page 76. I'm going to jump up a little bit to Schedule C, which is page 74. So this is on Statement C, which we looked at right at the beginning. There was a non-major governmental funds that was a big round number kind of listed on that Statement C. So this ties to that number there, and this is broken down into your special revenue funds as well as your capital project funds. And so for special revenue funds, you have these 5 special revenue funds, and this is arranged just like Statement C and Statement E. So the first page is your assets, your liabilities, your balance sheet. So you can see the fund balance that you have left in these 5 funds, or that you have remaining in these 5 funds. And then the next page actually gives you a breakdown of the revenues and expenses that occurred in those funds to get to that fund balance. So for example, you can see that in the town hall fund, there was no activity. The meeting house fund had revenues of $3,900, did not have any expenses. Same thing for capital projects funds. You have more capital project funds. You actually have, you have 10 of those. But you can go through and see the activity that actually occurred in those capital project funds and how they finished the year from a fund balance perspective. All right, so the last page basically culminates in our independent auditor report on internal controls, and this references our management letter. And I think you guys have a copy of the management letter as well. Is that right, Scott and Shannon?
They do, yes.
You do. Okay, great. Let me see if I can switch to that. So your management letter. So one of the things I talked about that we do at the beginning of our process is we look at your internal controls and not only analyze to see if that you are to ensure that you're following your own internal controls, but also we take any notes and make any comments on any suggestions we might have to strengthen those internal controls. So I'll just run through these management letter comments and just kind of explain them a little bit. And then you could guys, and then I'll be done and we can ask questions or we'll go about our business. So outdated checks, first one. So you basically just have some old outdated checks that are still sitting on your general ledger. And this is just a process of going through and either contacting vendors and voiding the old checks and getting new checks out. And if you can't contact vendors or whoever it's payable to, you can submit that to the state for unclaimed property. It's just a process. It's not a huge issue. It's just something, it's kind of like a house cleaning thing. And again, given the past year, I think given some of the turnover you guys have, I'm not surprised to see some outdated checks, but it's just something on the list. Hopefully as Shannon is able to get back into doing her role exclusively, might be able to get addressed. Bank reconciliations. At the time the audit, not all the bank reconciliations were done. Another thing that we consider, quite important is just getting bank reconciliations done in a timely fashion, just to make sure that everything is accounted for correctly. And so the reports that you guys get will then have some comfort level that those are also accurate as well. Fund balance activity. So as a standard, nothing should actually run through fund balance. It should all run through revenues and expenses. Shannon and I have talked about this. She understands it. And a lot of this fund balance activity is probably some old past practices that she walked into and was just continuing to use. And so we've talked about it now. And I believe that that practice is no longer going to be occurring. Journal entries, same thing. I talked about this with Shannon as well. Basically, there was a number of folks who were actually entering journal entries, and I think it just resulted in some errors. So Shannon is now going to be the only person entering journal entries into the system. To avoid some of these errors that have been occurring and just make those, the cleanup and the reconciliation process easier than what it has been in the past. 2 comments on credit cards. First, notice some charges or some areas that you were charged for tax and credit cards. Also not that unusual because that's one of the issues with credit cards is that it's hard, if you're going to buy something and you don't have the tax ID number and you're talking about it, $2.45, it's often worth just doing it. But again, just a comment, because obviously tax is not something that the town has to pay. And then the last note was a note about documentation to support all of the credit card expenses. There were just a couple that we pulled, didn't have enough documentation or substantial documentation to justify the expense. Not to say that expense was unnecessary, just as a whole, as a best practice, we recommend having documentation for all expenses, all income, so on and so forth. So again, nothing major here that gives us huge cause for concern. I think if I had to pick one, it'd be bank reconciliations. But again, given the past year, and I think the number of hats that Shannon was wearing, I'm not totally surprised by that. So I think that's it. I know it's thrilling. I usually answer it with crickets, but any questions anybody has?
Josh, I guess just one item. If you do reissue the management letter, I'll resubmit it to the board without draft so that they have it as a final copy. So once we're done with this conversation, that would be very helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, once we finish when we finish the final draft of the audit, we'll reissue the management letter as a final as well.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Josh, I don't know if this is your realm or Scott's. What is the Act 60 fund? What's that about?
That's one of our I'll have to, which page are you on, Rick?
It's on the fund balance page.
It's a special revenue fund. I should know this. And let me Act 60.
I think it has to do with our gravel operations, and I believe.
I think it's the, closing of the pit, right? Or is that what it is?
Correct.
Is what that is. And so we have stopped contributing to it as we have enough for the closure.
So that's, at some point, we do have a small operation where we do gravel and, mine, and at some point, the state requires us to have money for restoration, and so that's basically what that fund is established to do.
Okay, that's a town-owned property where the gravel's mined, or
it's up on 103 by the state, where the old state police barracks.
Oh yeah, okay. Thanks.
Any other questions?
So this combines both the highway fund, because we look at the highway fund balance and the general fund balance, but that's combined in your reports, correct?
It is, yes.
Yeah.
And sorry, just a tiny bit of background. The $100,000, was that something that to reduce taxes for the coming year? Is that a surplus we had?
Yeah, so that was, so for example, we just looked at your fund balance, your unassigned fund balance at the end of FY20 was, $1.3 million.
Mm-hmm.
So for your FY21 budget, you would have been using the fund balance as, based on your FY19 activity. And so basically and I can go back, let's see, actually I can figure this out. So as of June 30th, 2019, your fund balance in the general fund was $1.5 million. And so at that time, management and probably the board at the time decided, okay, how much of that how much, if any, do we want to use to reduce taxes in FY21? Because that was the budget cycle you were in at that time. And so $100,000 was decided upon, and then that actually goes into a separately warned article that would have occurred in March of 2020.
And can you just go over again what the standard practice is for this, because we have 3 new board members, of how much you should hold in your fund balance?
Yep.
We think our policy is what, 20%, though we hear 3 months as well is sort of the rule of thumb these days.
Yeah, absolutely. So 30, 60, 90 days. So there's your 3 months is what and that's of operating expenses. And your operating expenses, I already did this calculation, basically 30 days of operating expenses is $500,000. So $1.5 million is kind of that 90-day, that 3-month window you were just talking about, which is basically where you guys are. So you guys are right in the sweet spot there.
Great.
Are there any further questions for Josh or? Seeing none, Scott, I guess, Josh, I guess you're off the hook.
Okay, great. Well, it's been a pleasure. If you guys ever have any questions, we're happy to always answer. And we've been in contact a lot with Scott and Shannon, and we'll be so in the future as well. I know we've got some plans to do some work on fixed assets and some other things. But pleasure to work with the town of Rockingham. And hopefully next time we can do this in person.
Yeah, that'd be good. I appreciate your review here. I thought it was very informative. Answered some of my questions, so.
Good.
Thank you, Josh.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Oops.
Okay, moving along on the agenda, we have a resolution for a letter of support for the USRDA grant, and that I believe is for the Greater Rockingham Area Services.
Right, if you remember at our joint meeting, we just had a brief conversation that a request from that agency, they wanted just a resolution of support. They're applying for some additional funds for the health center to help them with their heating system. So at that time, we said we would put it on a future agenda, and so here we are. So it does not obligate us to any specific funding. It's more just supporting their application as they go through the vetting process, and hopefully as a nonprofit are able to get some money through this USDA grant program.
Okay, so we will need a motion to approve the resolution here, and I think in the body of that motion, I think we should appoint the manager as the signatory rather than the select board chair. If you read the document, it says document should be executed by an authorized official of the governing body. So either I can do it or Scott can, either one. It has to be in the motion who's to sign. So I'll take a motion to approve or disapprove the resolution here.
I'll move to approve the resolution with Scott as the designated signer.
We hear a second?
I'll second that motion.
Motion been made and seconded to approve the USDA Rural Development Report, resolution for the Greater Rockingham Area Services. Any further discussion? Seeing and hearing none, all those in favor would vote aye.
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 All those opposed would vote nay. Motion carries. Scott, do you have a original there?
I will get one.
If you don't, I got one.
I just
right
have
here.
the
You can take
copy.
this. Well,
Yeah.
it's got some crap on the back.
So no, I'll give one from. We'll get that out. So thank you.
Okay, next item is item number 4. This is appointments. First is the BF Opera House. There were 3 other people that were on that original committee. Ellen Howard was on it, Leroy Watson, Martha Rowley was on it. There are a few others that have resigned since then, and that's why 2 other members got appointed the last meeting. So we need to, these people would like to be reappointed. I got an email from Martha Rowley saying that her computer is such an age that she doesn't have a microphone or a camera on it, so she can't attend by Zoom, but she would like to be on the committee so that eventually if she does able to appear, then she can, or if we're able to do it live, she'll glad to serve. So I
She
need a
could
motion.
phone in through Zoom. There's a
Yeah,
phone
I
number.
did mention that, yeah. She did say that she goes to the library and uses their computer down there to attend trustees meetings, but I'm not sure. She's down to Saxon River resident, so I don't know what trustee board, or maybe she's got us mixed up with the trustees and versus select board, but anyway. So if we can get a motion to put those on, I guess you're gonna check with Dave Stern.
I have spoken with him, and he is willing to serve again on the committee.
Okay, is he on the RED committee?
I don't think so.
I don't think so. no.
I just wondered if he was on that committee, because he shouldn't be on both of them. I mean, that's what I'm saying.
Right. No, he's not.
Okay, I was just
Yep.
curious.
Yep. So I'd like to add David Stern's name to the list.
That's fine.
Okay.
Want to make a motion to add these 4?
Okay.
All those want to come back? Ellen wants to come back
Yep.
and all?
So Peter, how many people then will the committee comprise? Because I know we appointed
You got 6.
6. Okay,
That would
Just
be
wanted
Sue, I think.
Sue and Rick.
And these 4.
got it. Thank you.
And what exactly are the responsibilities of that committee?
They would,
That's some select board can determine. We should discuss it.
so let's get a committee formed, and I don't know when you're planning on doing your negotiations with the RED. Have
It's
you
been
started?
ongoing, so it started
so it's
last
ongoing,
November,
so-
and it's continuing.
All right,
so bring
I
them
think
up
the
to
best thing to
speed.
do is get these people on board, and then maybe get an agenda, schedule a meeting for that group, so they can, and we'll get the charge explained as the select board would so dictate.
So that's the way it works? We would tell them what we want them to do?
Yeah, basically.
So we should decide that now, right?
Yeah,
What their charge is.
correct.
Okay.
We're not going to decide their charge now, no. Yes? No.
Well, I think we should elect the people first and then discuss the charge.
Okay.
Okay. So, I don't have all. I should have all the names in front of me, but I moved that Ellen Howard, David Stern, Martha Rowley, and
Leroy Watson.
Leroy Watson
Yep.
join Susan and me in comprising the Opera House Committee.
Do we hear a second?
I'll second.
Motion is made and seconded to have Ellen Howard, Lori Watson, Martha Rowley, and David Stern appointed to the Opera House Committee. Any discussion? Seeing and hearing none, all those in favor would say aye.
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 I,
All those opposed would say nay. Evidently, there is no nay, so the motion carries. Now let's discuss a charge for this committee. I would think that we would just have them to gather and to advise the manager as to what they would like to see done with this committee, or with the Opera House. I think that was the intent of the last one, wasn't it, Sue, that you guys got together and came up with ideas and bounced ideas off, and then I don't know if you were planning on being part of the negotiating factor, or just let Scott run with that.
I mean, I think the committee should be aware of that, but then he has to let the select board aware in general too. So, I mean, part of it is I don't know what the timing is. I mean, if this is turnover is going to be between now and if it's going to be the next fiscal year, that's different than if we're going to open up the Opera House in the next coming months, then the Opera House committee should be part of that discussion too, before Red takes over. I just don't know what the status is yet of starting movies again, and what's going to happen with the Opera House, and what the time frame is between when the town's going to control it and Red will take over. If the negotiations are still going on, I don't know if it's going to start July 1st.
Well, maybe I can give a little bit of background, just because we've been having conversations. We started in November with Red, and obviously we were still unsure of where we were going to be in terms of public assembly. So we decided at that point it didn't make sense until we reconstituted in March. The new board came after the election. So we have reconstituted and started those conversations. I think right now the rough goal is to have if the governor is moving towards lifting restrictions as early as 4th of July, we're hopeful to have programming through the summer and into the fall. So I think the goal that we've been working on and from a staff perspective is we have code and other issues, physical plant issues that have to be addressed. We have a grant opportunity that we had discussed previously at this board level about the shuttered venue grant and how that might assist us in getting ourselves back up and operating. And then the third piece is if we are going forward with an agreement with a provider like Red, then that would be an item that would have to come to the board for discussion, and ultimately, if we're going to enact something, would have to come probably no later than the end of May, early June, so we'd be ready to move forward by the time the restrictions are lifted, end of June, early July. So it's not really, nothing set in stone, obviously, but that's sort of how the process, at least to this point, has been moving forward.
If Scott, if you will be negotiating with RED, you will then be an ex officio member of the committee, the Opera House Committee?
Well, ultimately, I've got to present a lease to the board because the board has to approve whatever agreement we go forward with. So I'll be working with with them, and the way I look at the Opera House Committee is like any other committee. I think, except for land use committees, which have very specific responsibilities, they're advisory in nature, and we should work with them in that capacity. And hopefully, we can make it work for the committee as well as work for the trustees. That's really the goal. So.
Right. So the next step would not, if the committee has been approved, the personnel or staffing of the committee has been approved, the next step is for someone to call a meeting. Sue, you and I are the two trustee members. Would you like to, or would you like me to take steps to call a first meeting?
You can go ahead and organize a first meeting, and then we can, when we meet, then we can determine the chair and how the meeting will work and all. But we'll start with and it'll have to be warned, so we'll have to work with Shannon or whoever to warn a meeting. Yeah, and in our last meeting, the committee, it was advisory, but we also did some sort of research on who comes to the Opera House and trying to inform who our audience was and who our customers were. Now we're in a whole nother realm post-COVID, right. Hopefully soon.
Yeah, I think
we'll have to figure out what, mainly I think it's sort of, I see us, the committee, kind of as a bridge between while the town manages it and Red, if that takes over.
I think I look at it, Susan, probably in all fairness, none of us really know how the general public's going to react to going back to see blockbuster movies or going to live performances or basically, coming into rooms with crowds. So I think we're all going to estimate the next 18 to 24 months in terms of what we think might happen. But, I think we're all going to be realistic about, we just don't know.
Right.
So I think part of what I want to work with the committee on is, we're going to have to be very flexible here. We are in unknown territory. We're going to do the best we can. I think all of us want to make sure that this is successful. I think we're all pulling in the right direction. It's just going to be a lot of assumptions and a lot of unknowns. And hopefully, with some of the things that we're going to do on the physical plant, maybe the assistance of the grant, and if we do come up with a lease that works for the town as well as for Red, then I think maybe we'll get to a good place. So I think that's sort of where I see this all coming together.
So on a timing note, there is a group that is contemplating bringing cabaret back in October. And that will involve this committee having set the agreement up with RED and RED working with this entity. And so we have to work backwards from that. The people who are promoting cabaret need to start working on it relatively soon. Unless they have a deal with the venue, they can't proceed. So my thought is that we should meet relatively soon. Does that work for everybody?
Yeah. We'll see.
Yeah, there's a lot of moving parts here. I think we're gonna have to do, do the best we can. And I know that
Yep.
sometimes it's frustrating because now we're dealing with 6 people's schedules. So that can sometimes be a little bit of a challenge to try to
Mm.
find a spot where, 6 folks can have some time together, but we'll figure it out.
Good.
Okay, so I'll leave it in your hands. Call the first meeting, Rick, and take it from there, and you can report back to the board as need be and let us know what's going on.
Will do.
Okay. Now, we need to, automated vehicle evaluation committee. We need a representative. Stefan Golick was the previous one, and he is no longer on the board, so we need to appoint someone to that committee. Any volunteers for that one?
What would this person do on that committee?
Just advisory stuff as to whether, you'd like to see that happen, discussion of what goes on with it. I think you've got some information in the previous packets about what's entailed.
I think
I think there's only 2 of us, 2 towns, I think, Springfield and us are currently signed, although I thought I saw something on the news or in the paper that there were 4 other towns up north that were involved in that too.
We haven't agreed to do this.
No,
Yeah.
No.
we are in a very preliminary conversation with folks from Vermont DOT. And really what we're trying to do is to get representatives from both the village and the town and continue the dialogue with Vermont DOT. We've had some public information meetings. We've presented some items on the website. The idea is working forward to see, is there enough support to go forward in some sort of way to then get to the point where we have a more formal relationship, and at that point there's actually an agreement that is entered into between the DOT and the community to go forward with specific requirements for testing. So we're really just feeling around the edges. The Springfield folks have decided to jump in with both feet. They already have a permit with DOT and are moving forward on. I'm not sure where they stand in terms of bringing in private sector companies to begin to actually test within the roads in Springfield, but that's really what the permit from DOT would involve. So,
Do we get compensated for this or anything?
No.
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 We just
it's part of your big fund money they pay you for serving on this board.
No, I
When,
no,
when
I
you
don't
get done,
mean
you'll find
me.
out you're just not even going to make
She meant the
minimum
town.
wage. but-
No, I'm not talking about me, Peter. I mean the town. Does the town get compensated for agreeing to allow this?
No.
No, we just
No,
volunteer to be
it's
guinea
testing.
pigs.
Yeah, they're just trying to test and see if there's any value to the automated vehicles. They're trying to push this for, future.
Now, if we're a person that feels pretty decided on this issue, should we not volunteer to be on this committee?
You don't have to be on a committee, and you don't have to even vote to have the town participate in the automatic vehicle testing. I think the village is pushing it, but I don't know.
I think it's terrible
Is Deb the
myself.
representative from the village?
Deb is the appointed rep from the Dulles
So-
Falls.
Okay, well, I think I'll probably stay out of it because I think it's absolutely terrible.
Okay, I guess that's yes, putting it mildly.
Exactly. You're direct.
I'm looking at Elijah here. You're part of the village, so
Yeah.
and also on this board.
have
I don't
so
know
many time
how they
commitments.
meet or what the deal. I have no clue.
I've got so many time commitments right now. I'm really would prefer not to take on any more responsibilities.
Okay.
If anybody else.
No thanks. The Opera House Committee will keep me very busy.
Okay. Sue, you anything you're interested in, really?
Not, I am also stretched thin. I mean, if it's infrequent, I could potentially participate. I mean, we just need to have I'm assuming we need to have another public meeting, and then the select board has to vote yay or nay on this. So this committee is just gathering more information, correct?
Right. We've had, 2 presentations, I think, which we've put up on Fact TV and We've had some other material presented through DOT that we've also, I think, distributed. It's really just continuing that process, Sue. And we
Mhm.
don't have a schedule. We don't have a specific deadline date. We're really doing this as an exploratory and sort of very preliminary fashion. So, in terms of time, I'm not looking at this to be meeting monthly or weekly or any kind of, real intense time crunch. I think we're just dipping our toes, and as we move forward, and obviously everybody on the board has to be comfortable before we get to the point where we're formalizing any kind of relationship with DOT.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's also something in the future, we're going to be dealing with this as a town in the future. I mean, right now, we may decide we don't want to be the testing site, but it won't be that long before this is happening in our town. So I think it's important to be engaged in the discussion, even if the decision is, we don't want to be a test case.
True. Yes.
Isn't it that they can still do it on class 1 roads? But they need permission from the town to operate on 2, 3, and 4 classes?
I think right now they're going to take the position, Peter, that they want to have the host community give their permission. They could do that if they wanted to.
Right,
I just don't think
that's what
they
I
want
thought,
to do
yeah.
that. I think they want to do this cooperatively. They feel pretty strongly that it's only going to work if we go forward in a spirit of cooperation.
Okay, Sue, you want to take it just for,
I'll take it just because you need someone, but yeah, I mean, I'm kind of, not really gung ho about being a test case, but I think we need to be part of the discussion because this will be our future.
yeah, I'm sure it's gonna, it'll come back to us eventually, but
Mhm.
so, okay, well, all those in favor of appointing Sue as the evaluation committee representative from the select board would say aye.
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 All those opposed? Motion carries. Next, we want to ratify Bonnie Northup as appointment to Joint Village Bridge Committee. This is a vote that was taken last meeting, and we just need to ratify it because it's not on the agenda for action. So,
I move that Bonnie North be appointed our representative to the Joint Vilas Bridge Committee.
second. Motion made and seconded to appoint, ratify Bonnie Northup as the appointment to the Village Bridge Committee. Further discussion?
I'd just like to make a clarification for people. Some people contacted me because they saw the name Northup and thought it was an error. I legally go by both names. Northup is my maiden name. I've been using a shortened version of that professionally for over 40 years, and that is legally set up through the courts. But I haven't gone through the rigmarole of changing my driver's license, which is what they Xeroxed when I joined the planning commission. So I guess that's how that name.
Yeah, I was one of those that questioned the name because I thought it was a misspelling, but.
Yeah, right.
But
So
I
somebody
was
has-
corrected on that point, so
Yeah,
I'm fine
so
with it. Doesn't matter.
Bonnie North is legally my name, and Bonnie Northup is as well for tax purposes and everything else.
Oh, boy.
Thank you.
Talk about trying to muddle the works here.
Yeah, it's gonna-
Two
right.
names, so they can't get you one way or the other.
Don't talk to me.
Okay.
Talk to Bonnie Northup.
Exactly.
Scott, will we, the next one on the agenda is the resolution of BF Garage. Were you just going to give us an update on that? There's no resolution currently.
Right. Well, we
There's a-
originally put out the agenda. We had thought that there might be some action required from the select board just in terms of the CDBG funding or other related funding with this new revised project. The timing of that dragged a little later than I think was anticipated. So basically what I handed out to you this evening is just some information that there'll be another community conversation and update on the revised proposal. And that is for next week, Tuesday the 13th. It's a Zoom meeting at 11:30 a.m. We will put it up on the website as well for publicizing that for people who are interested, who want to participate. Just in talking with folks from Wyndham Whizzer Housing, they're moving forward and they're close to the point where they will be having a revised proposal that will go through, again, another DRB review, planning, land use type of review, as well as potentially coming back to this board with an updated request for CDBG funding. So we will just keep this as an informational at this point. There's nothing official being asked of this board at this point, and we will try to keep the community abreast as much as we can as this project does move forward.
Okay, now we're down to item number 7, which is a resolution. And can somebody just refresh my memory? I was doing something else when this was brought
Yeah,
up.
so maybe I'll grab Gary back. So what we've been doing is working on an updated grant with our fire departments, our multiple departments. So Gary needed some updates from some of the grant folks in terms of how the particulars of this grant could be broken up. So Gary, maybe with that as a little background, you can kind of give the board an update.
So there's some new code requirements for communications devices, and the fire departments need to upgrade the portable radios that go in the fire trucks and the mobile units. They're expensive, $3,000 per portable unit. So they're doing those over time. And this request would maximize USDA grant funds available. The Community Facilities Grant allows $50,000 maximum. And we think that, or the indication is with the majority of the equipment being for the Bellows Falls Fire Department, it will be their split, which is 75% funding. And so that allows us to purchase 10 of the portable radios for the BF Fire Department, 6 of them for the Rockingham Fire Department. And then there's also Bellows Falls Fire Department cannot get communications well in the village. They're often cut off, and so there's the solution is a $15,000 repeater that would be installed on an existing tower that they already use on Griswold Drive. So there's no construction or environmental. It's strictly the $15,000 piece of equipment. So the total for that grant is $63,000, and the request would be for $10,750 of matching funds from the town and $5,000 from the village. And typically, the memorandum of understanding that the fire departments have with each other and their responsibilities, the town purchases essential equipment for all of the fire departments. So even though it's for the village fire department, that's why the request for matching funds on this grant. Yeah.
What about the Saxons River Fire Department? Will they, presumably they need to communicate with the BF Fire Department. Would they have the same equipment?
So the Saxons River will be getting upgrades as well through other funds. The USDA is not a good program for Saxons River Fire Department. They're not eligible for it. So all that really does is make the share that the USDA contributes smaller. It doesn't. This is not a good venue to purchase Saxons River's radios. So.
If BF gets the new radios and Saxons River has the old radios, will they be able to talk at a fire site?
So I don't know the answer to that. I don't think the new radios are incompatible with old radios communications. From what I understand, the big issue with any communications between any of the fire departments in Bellows Falls is the repeater and being able to get the radio communication to Bellows Falls, period, from anyone or even with each other. So I think this grant will help in that communications, but I don't really know the technical details of the equipment.
Would it be a good idea to have the Saxons River chief talk to the Bellows Falls chief and make sure
They have been.
they have it and that things
Yes,
are copacetic?
they've all been meeting on this. So
Okay.
when the fire departments make any equipment requests, they talk with each other and have operating agreements, memorandum of understanding. So like the Jaws of Life is shared between them, and they have something like 8 miles of I-91 they're responsible for. So hoses, when they're replacing hoses, turnout gear, they do all communicate and coordinate on those.
Thank you.
Authorizing the matching funds of $10,750 towards the fire equipment, USDA fire equipment grant.
So if we're successful for the grant, we'll be coming back to you with grant paperwork, obviously.
Yes.
We'll have another opportunity, but I think what they want to make sure of is that the board, at least at an initial level, supports the local match requirements, and that's really what we're asking for this evening.
I just have a general question that probably exposes my ignorance, but I should ask it. All right, so we say yes, and we have to, where does that 10,000 come from, according to this budget stuff that we looked at tonight?
So we have economic development fund. So and Peter referred to the development fund. And so that's one area where we've assigned matching fund for grants to come from.
Okay.
This particular year, there are other economic development funds coming from the American Rescue Plan, which we'll also be able to use to match grants.
So it's going to come through economic development then?
Yes.
Well,
Okay.
right now, we're proposing that, Bonnie. The honest answer is you could take it from a variety of different sources. You can take it from your accumulated fund balances if you'd like. You could take it from your economic development funds that are unspent or unencumbered, or we could take it from other funds as we go forward. The grant timing on these things sometimes are, we apply in March or April and we don't hear sometimes for extended periods of time. It goes through a long process. So all this does is really just obligate us if we bring back a grant agreement. At that point, we'd identify specifically to you how we would accommodate the match. And
okay, I'm just trying to, wrap my brains around all this
no, the board would
budgetary
at that
stuff.
point have an opportunity to say, we would, certainly not want to take it maybe from one allocation versus another. So we would make a recommendation. The board would have the ultimate authority for that appropriation.
Okay, great, thank you.
It's a good question. Scott also makes a good point. So this application that goes in April 16th, we might get an award late summer, early fall.
Right.
But if we don't, it's in a national competition. It's then submitted to a statewide allocation. So it could be a year from now that we get notice of award.
Okay, great, thank you.
We should have a motion on the floor before we have discussion, but Gary's kind of gone over and gave us a background of what this is for. So if we can get a motion on the floor, we can continue discussion, because I have a couple of points I'd like
The
to make.
motion should be to
To
approve.
approve a resolution for the fire department radios upgrade with matching funds of, I think it's 10,750 you're looking for?
Yes.
With
Okay,
matching funds.
okay, so moved.
Okay, do we have a second?
Second.
Okay. Discussion, motion's made into, seconded to approve the resolution for the fire department radios upgrade with matching funds of 10,750. My issue is where the funds coming from. It was mentioned the development fund. And I know that I don't think that's what this fund is designated for. We just approved a grant the last meeting for a $75,000 match coming out of this fund or whatever else funds we can find. I just have an issue with it coming out of the development fund, which generally is set up to do loans for business expansion and things. Usually handles through the RLF committee. And if we take the matching funds from that, we're depleting that fund. and they're not gonna get paid back because that's how they get them back. You loan out the money and they pay it back.
Oh.
So that's my issue with this thing. I support the grant for the resolution for upgrading the radios. I don't have a problem with that. So
Is there a
if
public?
we can find the money somewhere, then I don't have a problem with, I just hate to keep dipping
Yeah,
into this.
yeah, I
Right.
was wondering about
the
that myself,
development.
because I know like economic development is economic development, it's not fire department necessarily.
Because it's
yeah.
not, there's no money per se in Gary's budget for matching funds. It's, so it's, you gotta get from someplace and.
Can I, Peters, could I speak to that, or would you like me to wait a minute?
Just a second, I'll see if anybody else has got anything to go for it, so. Does anyone else have any input? Okay,
No,
I
other
guess
than
you-
I agree with that, Peter, and maybe it's for further discussion we can have about setting up some type of matching grant type fund that we won't have this question in the future.
Yeah, I think that's a really good idea, just portion off some of this money that's portioned around and,
And it's Scott and Gary to be, upfront. They did mention there's ARP funds coming out, the new funds they're supposedly come. Those aren't probably going to hit the state till June, and then the state's got to decide where they want to throw the money. So, as I say, could be funds out there sitting there we don't even aware of yet.
right. I'm not saying we don't need these for the fire trucks.
I support,
think
as
we
I
do.
say, I will
Yeah.
support the thing, but I have a concern on where the funds are being taken from. So, are we ready for a vote?
I thought Shannon was gonna mention something.
Oh, I thought that was, go ahead, Shannon, you got something?
I just wanted to kind of speak to the development fund. So that the development fund currently has over $500,000 in it. And we really don't have any new applicants because of COVID. And so those funds just sitting there aren't really doing anything for us. So when Gary and I were speaking, if we were to take 75,000 for the next fiscal year and use it towards matching grants, we have ways in which to replenish the development fund. And so if we, think creatively about it, right now, those funds are just sitting there. And if we don't use them, the interest rate's very, very low. So the ability to use funds that we have in such a large amount could work to our advantage. And again, Gary has plans to replenish that development fund. So just want to throw that out there that we weren't looking to use the funds as matching grants and not return it.
Well, could we do something like Peter just said? I don't know how it works with your auditor. If you just kind of reallocate $100,000 of that 500,000 and call this, grant fund balance or something like that? Is that something you could do?
Yeah, so that's what Gary and I had spoken about, just using 75,000 for matching funds monies, and that would come to you guys as a select board. For these small grant matches right now, we have money within our budgets that we would use to do, and we have the funds or we wouldn't have come to you. But going forward, just to have a further discussion about this 500,000 that's just sitting there for the development, the RLF typically does make recommendations for loans, but as far as kind of using money for matching funds, that would come directly to the select board. It wouldn't need to go to the RLF. So just in the back of your minds, and again, it wouldn't be money that we just use and don't replenish. Gary has lots of ideas and ways to we would replenish the development fund.
Okay.
Any further discussion? Seeing and hearing none, all those in favor of approving the resolution for the fire department upgrading for the radios with matching funds of $10,750 would say aye.
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 Okay, that's your resolution.
Thank you.
We'll figure out where the money
Thanks,
comes later.
Gary.
Mhm.
Okay, we're down to review the agenda items for the next meeting, April 20th, 21st, 21. I know the financials should be on that, I think.
Yes, I don't think we have anything. We're opening a bid on paving. I'm not sure we'll have it ready for award by the 20th. We'll have to see.
We will have that ready actually, because.
Oh, we will have that ready? Okay.
Yes,
I
we
know
will.
we're opening it next week, so,
So paving bids?
yeah, we should have paving bids.
Paving and chip seal.
Yes.
And Peter, the Connecticut River Conservancy, the Kathy,
Yeah, I was gonna just go there with that. I
Okay.
didn't know if you had heard. I know I told her that we could try and get her on the 20th.
Mhm.
That's for the FERC relicensing. The river steward from Brattleboro wants to come up and speak on that.
Okay.
And Betsy Thurston would also like to do a BFDDA update on that agenda, Peter, if that's okay.
That's fine.
Are we gonna have a discussion, about the website and tech issues, how, you know, how to make it easier for people to vote and to figure out who's actually a voter and so forth and so on.
So we're working on the website issue internally. We're not prepared at the moment to bring anything to the board, but especially not in 2 weeks. But when we are, we'll definitely let you guys know and ask Peter if we can put it on the agenda.
Okay.
Okay, you all set? Okay. So you'll just update us when you get ready to break us some news or whatever on where we stand with that, Shannon.
Absolutely.
Okay. All right, agenda for the joint board meeting, that's that's gonna be in June, so we got a little time to play with that
time
one.
on that one.
Review and approve orders, bills, and warrants. Scott, I didn't have a payroll warrant in this thing. You gave me a blank. And I looked through those that Rick's signing, and there's just paid a AP warrant.
Okay. I
So-
didn't,
You know what happened? We left that upstairs. I thought Deb was coming in to sign warrants today, but she's not until tomorrow, so we'll bring that to the next meeting.
okay.
You want me to stop in tomorrow and just sign what's there so we can get it going or whatever?
That'd be
That
great.
would be wonderful.
All right, not a problem.
If we have questions on the bills and warrants, is now the time, or?
Yep. Now's the time. Thanks, Rick.
The Golden Cross ambulance contract, it looks like it's $72,000 a year, is that right? And
Correct.
is there also a per call charge, or how does that work?
No, we have mutual aid, so that's our contract, and then we don't pay per call.
Okay. And then maybe it was in this one or the previous one, there was a payment, a spousal support payment for a town employee. And I didn't know what that was about.
That's a spousal support payment for a town employee. So they pay it out of their payroll, and then we pay the spouse.
I see. So the town money isn't being used for that.
Absolutely not.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's somebody getting their paycheck garnished.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you.
It just goes through their earnings. It's just a way to.
Something that people have talked to me about is the procurement policies. Maybe at some point we could have a discussion about that. Sometimes someone who does business with the town wanted to talk to me about this, and I've made no promises at all. Other than that, I would bring it up.
You better not.
Exactly.
You just
Watch
got your
out.
fingers shook at this morning,
Yeah,
a little earlier
no,
today.
I just said I would see if we could have a discussion. You know.
Yeah, we do have a purchase policy.
I know you do, and it could be elaborated a little more carefully and maybe upgraded a little bit, and particularly when it comes to a bid versus an estimate, and also I guess I would like to discuss why we don't have more of a strict incentive or policy to spend our money locally? Why do we buy our
We-
oil? f-
We
You do have
do,
that option.
we do have a very strict policy regarding that, and we're under no obligation, even if, we're not under no obligation to take the lowest bid. So, when we do an RFP and our bids come in, the bids come into management, so whatever department head, so for instance, the, chip seal and pavement will come in, and we will, as, Andy Howard, Scott and myself will make a recommendation to the board of who we think that you should choose and why. And if it's not the lowest bid, then why we are also stating that. When we do the bids though, regardless of who's the lowest, we reduce any local bids by 5%. So when we're looking at bids across the board and we're giving you information about local versus non-local and the amounts, we reduce their bid by 5% before we present it to you. But we're under no obligation to go the lowest bid. And in fact, and that will come up this year with fuel and propane, because we highly recommend that we go with a local vendor, even if it's more expensive per gallon for the fuel and oil. The service contract associated and how quickly we get service would be very different if we went with a local vendor. So we will discuss that further. It's a really good point, Bonnie. But as I said, we have no obligations once we do an RFP to take the lowest bid. We can take whatever we would like.
Yeah, well, one of the things I keep looking at is cheap oil from Keene when we have Coto right here in our town.
Well, they were half the price.
Half the price.
They were
yeah.
half the
Yeah.
price.
So, Scott, you wanna see what the schedule looks like or our agenda looks like next meeting? If we got a place
Yeah,
to slip
we'll
it in
try
there,
to
we'll
find a
do it.
spot
If
for a
not, it'll
couple of
be
these
sometime in
items.
May.
Right.
Yeah, well, it's no hurry.
No,
It's
but
just-
we'll just, if the sooner we get it on the table, it's easier to go for it, so. Okay, we're down to other business. Let's start with Rick. You got anything?
Nothing.
Nope.
Bonnie? Elijah? Okay, Scott,
got two.
would you find anything out from where we're going with Hetty Green? I know they're working like bees and beavers up there, but
Well,
we
there's
know
a
what's
couple
going on up
pieces to
there?
that. The state has been up there, and in fact, I was up there with the fire chief and the state electrical inspector about a week and a half ago. They had some code compliance issues, but they're now in compliance, so that's the good news. They've made progress on that. The issue is on the north portion of the building, the state fire folks made recommendations about what could be saved and what had to be demolished so that they had a fire break. So there had been an ongoing conversation about that. My understanding is now that seems to have been resolved. So basically the developer has to come back with either a proposal for the northern portion for some sort of redevelopment, or it's going to just be demolished and reused as parking or space.
So they haven't given us any indication what's going on. I know
No,
there's
that-
been,
That meeting was, I think, 10 days ago on a Friday, so he
Yeah.
hasn't come back yet with anything formal.
yeah, I saw they had a portion of the one section taken right out of the middle there, so I
That
figured
was,
there
I
must have been
think, the
something
start
going on
where
there.
he had to go for the fire break.
Yeah,
So
so we don't know what they're gonna use that for. I mean,
talked with the owner that day. He was still not 100% sure. He had talked about potentially storage units, but that if you look at the site, that's a tough spot for storage. He had talked about additional parking. He just wasn't sure. So
Okay.
we left that alone.
okay. Anyone else, Sue, you have anything?
No, I'm all set, thank you.
Oh, I do have one thing.
Okay, go ahead, Rick.
The Saxons River trustees are meeting next Tuesday night at 7 p.m. on Zoom. I will be there. I don't know if anyone else wants to join that meeting.
Tuesday?
Yep,
Yeah, they got a Zoom link too.
the
Yeah.
12th.
Yeah, Louise sent me something. I forgot the date.
Right. I think she sent an invitation to all of us.
Yeah. If I can, I will.
Okay.
Okay, we don't need an executive session, so if there's no more objects to take care of, we'll to entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Okay,
I second it.
that's second. All those in favor would say aye.
All right.